In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, November 15th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol is heading to San Francisco to attend the multilateral meetings within the APEC framework aimed at addressing ways to spur sustainable economic growth across the Pacific region and to partake in bilateral gatherings to discuss trade interests and security concerns. Also in San Francisco, much spotlight has been directed at the highly anticipated summit between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping on the margins of the APEC meeting that US authorities claim will seek to keep on constructive track bilateral ties between the two superpowers. Meanwhile, Korea is counting down one day to its annual college scholastic ability test, better known as Suneung, here in the country. That takes place tomorrow, that is Thursday, after much earlier dispute over the so-called killer questions, which are absent this year. We begin on the diplomatic front as President Yoon Suk-yeol heads to San Francisco to attend this year's summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation with plans to address economic interests and security concerns. Our presidential correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
Amid crises and challenges, from the conflict between Israel and Hamas and the war in Ukraine to climate change and supply chain disruptions, President Yoon Suk-yeol embarks on a mission to boost South Korea's status as a global pivotal state as he heads on Wednesday to San Francisco for the APEC Summit.
저는 세계 GDP의 60% 이상을 차지하는 회원국의 정상들이 한데 모이는 이번 회의에서 공급망 다변화와 무역 투자 확대와 같이 우리 경제에 실질적으로 보탬이 되는 협력 방안을 논의할 것입니다.
As soon as he lands, before he starts his official diplomatic events, he's set to meet over lunch with local Koreans and people of Korean descent, a customary schedule that he has kept for most of his overseas trips. His first event related to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation is the APEC CEO Summit, a business forum run by the chairing country, the US. At that summit, Yoon will give a keynote speech. He then will attend a reception for the leaders and end his first day in San Francisco by meeting young leaders in technology. The official working sessions for APEC will start on Thursday under the theme of creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. Laying out South Korea's role in global cooperation, Yoon will attend the meetings and offer support to countries vulnerable to climate change. He'll also emphasize the need for multilateral efforts to strengthen supply chains and establish digital ethical standards amid the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence. Amid a series of APEC meetings, Yoon's sideline meetings with other leaders are also noteworthy. First, he's set to attend a summit of the US-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, also known as IPEF. He's also set to meet his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida and jointly deliver a speech at Stanford University. With a sideline summit between US President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping, there is also a possibility that a sideline meeting between Yoon and Xi could happen. In terms of regional security, President Yoon has said that during the APEC summit, he will bring up the arms exchanges between North Korea and Russia to emphasize what this really means to global security. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Ahead of his separate summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, US President Joe Biden reaffirmed his intentions to restore bilateral ties and to place them back on track to rein in broader concerns over global security. Our An Sung-jin covers his remarks.
U.S. President Joe Biden spoke to the press before taking off for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco on Wednesday. And in response to the question of what he is hoping to get out of discussions with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, Biden emphasized normalized relations between the two countries.
As I told you, we're not trying to decouple from China, but what we're trying to do is change the relationship for the better.
This comes as U.S. officials work to restore military communication, especially with ongoing issues surrounding the One China principle on Taiwan and U.S. support for the Philippines in the conflict in the South China Sea. However, Biden also warned that despite efforts to stabilize the relationship, the U.S. would not give in to China's zero-sum diplomacy, as seen with past U.S. restrictions on exports of chips to China.
But I'm not going to continue to sustain the support for positions where if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets.
The meeting in San Francisco will be their first face-to-face in a year. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said that as President Biden focuses on current issues, he will be discussing the Israel-Hamas conflict and hoping to persuade Xi to use his influence in Iran to prevent Tehran from stoking tensions in the region further. Russia's invasion of Ukraine as well as economic issues between the two countries will also be high on the agenda. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Also, in San Francisco earlier on Tuesday, top diplomats from Seoul, Tokyo and in Washington met for trilateral talks to touch upon security concerns. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has details.
South Korea's foreign minister Park Jin met with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts in San Francisco on Tuesday local time and stressed the importance of trilateral cooperation.
The rules-based international order is facing multiple challenges in this poly-crisis era. Strengthening cooperation among like-minded countries is more important than ever, which is why the three of us are here.
He added that the three countries' national security advisors are expected to meet at the inaugural Indo-Pacific Dialogue. Japan's foreign minister also said Tokyo seeks to work together with Seoul and Washington, as the global challenges they face demand a higher level of strategic coordination.
I would like to work together with both of you to uphold the free and open international order based on the rule of law, as well as to aim for a world caring for human dignity.
And the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there's much work to do.
But events in the Middle East, shared economic cooperation, shared growth, addressing the security implications of the DPRK, Russia military cooperation, and a number of regional and global issues, including our ongoing support for Ukraine. These and more are on our agenda together.
During Tuesday's meeting, Seoul's foreign ministry said the three officials decided to closely cooperate to respond to the military ties between North Korea and Russia, a matter that they agreed is a serious threat to the Korean peninsula, as well as international peace and security. Pyongyang is believed to have provided Moscow with weapons and ammunition to use in Russia's war against Ukraine, in exchange for technology for its nuclear and missile programs. As for the situation in the Middle East, the three officials condemned the Hamas militant group's attack on Israel and called for an immediate release of hostages. They also agreed to work together to resolve the humanitarian crisis in the region. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
And the U.S. State Department has granted the green light to the possible sale of Standard Missile 6 Block 1 to South Korea for some $650 million. Now, this is according to the Pentagon on Tuesday local time. The SM-6 is said to be capable of directly tracking targets at a maximum range of over 400 kilometers. It can also reportedly intercept planes, ballistic missiles, as well as cruise missiles. A final approval requires a U.S. congressional vote. Now, back last year, Washington approved a similar sale to Tokyo. Meanwhile, North Korea says it has developed a new type of high-thrust solid-fuel engine for intermediate-range ballistic missiles. According to its state-run media on this Wednesday, ground jet tests on the new engine were successfully conducted this week. The tests on the first stage and second stage engines reportedly took place on November 11th and the 14th, respectively. And Pyongyang is said to have claimed that this development is an essential step toward bolstering its offensive power amid instability on the Korean peninsula. The Biden administration has backed Israel's allegations that Hamas is using Gaza's largest medical facility as a command center and a storage for weapons. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The White House on Tuesday said it has intelligence indicating that Hamas is using Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza to run its military operations, supporting Israel's initial claims. Speaking to reporters on board Air Force One, White House's national security spokesperson John Kirby said that Hamas has stored weapons at the hospital, adding that using the hospital for military operations is a war crime. Hamas says the claims are untrue. With the surrounding area the scene of intense fighting in the past week, the hospital suffering from energy shortages and dwindling supplies, the Gaza Health Ministry says at least 32 patients, including 3 premature babies, died over the weekend. As the Israeli military continues to seize key Hamas facilities during ground offensives in the Gaza Strip, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared that it has completely taken control of northern Gaza. Gallant added that no place will be safe for Hamas until Israel's mission is complete and they bring back all the hostages taken by the Palestinian militant group. Israel also said it had successfully taken over Hamas's parliament building, other government buildings, military and police offices, and intelligence bureau. And as the Israeli forces advance to the center of Gaza City, the IDF says it has found large weapons caches and explosives at many civilian sites, including at mosques and Al-Quds University in Gaza City. Meanwhile, the US and the UK announced a fresh round of sanctions on Tuesday targeting Hamas. The US's third round of sanctions this time targets key Hamas officials. It also targets mechanisms through which Iran provides support for Hamas and its ally Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The UK, on the other hand, sanctioned 4 Hamas senior leaders and 2 financiers, including the militant group's political leader in Gaza and the commander of its military arm. The sanctions aim to cut off funding for Hamas following its deadly attack on Israel last month. 이승재, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea is counting down one day to its annual college scholastic ability test, better known as Suneung here in the country, and our Yoon goes over some of the things to consider ahead of the big day tomorrow.
On Wednesday, some 504,588 students preparing to take the annual college admissions exam can visit their test site and confirm their elective test subjects. The exam that is seen as deciding students' futures will be conducted on Thursday across 1,279 test centers, which are normally designated high schools or middle schools. According to the Ministry of Education, not only is there a significant decrease in the number of registered test takers this year at 3,442 less than last year, but only 64.7% of the test takers are high school seniors. Rather, 31.7% are retaking the exam, marking the highest proportion of retakes in 28 years. The testing centers will open at 6:30 a.m. on Thursday, and students can enter until 10 minutes past 8 a.m. This is the 4th Suneung exam since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the first where no virus prevention rules will be implemented and all students at a venue will be taking the exam in the same room. But the Education Ministry has recommended that anyone confirmed to have the virus should wear a K94 mask and anyone with symptoms should wear a K80 mask. The ministry added that test takers who have the virus should eat lunch in a separate area. All test takers must enter their designated testing centers with their exam identification slip and official form of identification. To avoid confusion or mishaps on the morning of the exam, students are strongly recommended to check the location of their test center on the previous day. The only items that students are allowed to bring into the exam are black computer marking pens, white correction tape, a black mechanical pencil and extra .5mm lead, and an eraser. Those that wish to use a watch may wear an analog watch that doesn't have a Bluetooth function, including communication and payment functions, and doesn't have an LCD or LED display. And all electronic devices are prohibited. This includes all mobile phones, smart devices, earphones with Bluetooth functions, electronic dictionaries or calculators, as well as electronic cigarettes. With just one day left until the Suneung exam, students are recommended to limit consumption of caffeinated drinks and to get a good night's sleep to be in their best condition. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Plans are in the works to better support Korea's shipbuilding industry with substantial financial investments amid calls for green growth and more. Our business correspondent Moon Hae-ryan reports.
South Korea is ramping up efforts to boost its shipbuilding sector as it seeks to dominate the global market. During an emergency economic meeting on Wednesday, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced that the government will invest around 710 billion Korean won, roughly $544 million in the industry over the next 5 years. The sector makes up around 3% of total manufacturing and exports. Since 2017, South Korea has had a global market share of around 30%, and in October reached its highest order backlog since 2011. While the government says the industry is expected to keep growing, it faces many threats, including a workforce deficit, China's growing shipbuilding industry, and the International Maritime Organization's goal of reducing greenhouse gases and carbon footprint. These problems are set to be tackled in 3 different ways: developing future technology, systemizing the manufacturing process, and in modifying regulations. The government will inject 200 billion won into the commercialization of non-carbon-based fuels, such as liquefied natural gas, ammonia, and hydrogen for use in ships. The southeastern port city of Ulsan will have an area dedicated to supplying eco-friendly fuel and will supply more than a quarter of the fuel demand of domestic ships. The Minister of Oceans and Fisheries stressed the importance of this plan.
Global shipping companies are undergoing large-scale conversions to eco-friendly ships, and the availability of eco-friendly fuel at ports will be necessary for port competitiveness in the future.
A further 150 billion won will be spent on digitalizing and automating the manufacturing process, as well as the employment of 3,000 more workers every year to tackle labor shortages. Revamping the visa policy and increasing quotas for foreign workers, as well as establishing programs to help them adjust to life in South Korea, are also among the solutions proposed. The country's finance minister, Chu Kyung-ho, added that the government will be providing small to medium-sized companies with additional support, such as incentives for going green and incorporating digital technology. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Also, on the local front, employment expanded significantly in October, but the discrepancy in employment numbers between those in their 60s and those in their teens as well as 20s was more pronounced. Our Park Ko-nu explains.
South Korea's employment figures rose in October for the 3rd consecutive month. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, 346,000 jobs were added on year last month, with the employment rate seeing its biggest jump for any October at 63.3%. This was also the largest addition since May last year. By industry, employment numbers in the wholesale and retail sectors saw a jump of over 10,000, increasing for the first time in 53 months. Figures have been sliding due to structural changes within the industry, such as automated sales points, but numbers surged last month thanks to a tourism boost during the long holiday period in October. Other sectors, including health and social welfare, IT, and accommodation and restaurants, all saw increases in October. But the manufacturing sector, especially electronic components and machinery, saw employment figures drop by 77,000, with the base effect from the 200,000 jobs created the year before a contributing factor. By age, there were over 336,000 workers aged 60 and above compared to the month before, while employment figures for young adults aged 15 to 29 decreased by over 80,000. During an emergency economic ministerial meeting held on Wednesday, the government announced measures to boost employment and encourage young adults to find jobs.
The government will strengthen early support for young adults at each step of school, work and job hunting so that they can find the jobs they want.
The solutions include increases in internship programs for students, counseling for young adults who have just started working, and incentives and consultations for job hunters. Park Ko-nu, Arirang News.
Korea's auto exports for the first 10 months of this year have already surpassed those for the whole of last year. Seoul's Trade Ministry says the value of auto exports for the January to October period hit $58 billion, surging past last year's record of $54.1 billion. The amount also stands above this year's target of $57 billion. In October alone, the value of exports reached nearly $6 billion, the highest ever for the month of October, amid greater demand for eco-friendly cars. And Korean boyband 17 shared a message of solidarity at the UNESCO Youth Forum over in Paris. In a first in K-pop history, 17 filled a full one-hour session on Tuesday evening at the main hall of the UNESCO Youth Forum. Members of the group said sharing dreams is sharing hope, and while as individuals they may not be perfect, as a team they are the best. All 1,220 seats in the hall were filled with fans and delegates from 173 countries. The UNESCO Youth Forum, held once every 2 years, offers the young a platform for productive interactions.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. US President Joe Biden announced on Tuesday the allocation of $6 billion in new investments from the Inflation Reduction Act to address climate change. Coming in coordination with the release of the 5th National Climate Assessment, or NCA-5, the new investment plan focuses on ways to make the US more resilient to the impact of climate change. These include modernizing the electricity grid to prevent wildfires and withstand extreme conditions, as well as reducing flood risks. While the NCA-5 showed a decline in US greenhouse gas emissions, even with the increase in GDP and population, the Biden administration is also using newly allocated funds for ecosystem conservation and advancing environmental justice through Environmental Protection Agency programs. A Russian government delegation led by Natural Resources Minister Alexander Kozlov arrived in North Korea early Tuesday. Kozlov's arrival took place on the same day as U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with UN member states in Seoul. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency said on Wednesday that Russia and North Korea conducted talks on science and technology as well as the economy, while announcing their progress on the regime's ballistic missile program. Amid concerns over China and Russia potentially supporting the expansion of North Korea's military capacity by assisting North Korea to evade UN sanctions, Kozlov said Russia is willing to develop substantial cooperation with North Korea following September's agreements made in a meeting between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. In Mexico, the country's first openly non-binary magistrate, Jesus Ociel Baena, has been found dead. Baena was confirmed by the state prosecutor's office to have been found dead at home on Monday morning in the central Mexican city of Aguascalientes. They were alongside another person who the local LGBTQ+ rights group has identified as their partner. Baena made history in October 2022 when they were made the magistrate for the Aguascalientes State Electoral Court. As one of the most visible LGBTQ+ figures in the country, publishing on social media photos and videos wearing skirts and heels, Baena was known to have received threats of violence regularly. Mexico's Security Secretary Rosa Rodriguez said in a press briefing that it is unclear whether the death was a homicide or an accident. The Caribbean island of Dominica is creating the world's first marine protected area for the endangered sperm whale. The Dominican government announced on Monday that this will ensure one of the Earth's largest animals will come under protection by law. Around 800 square kilometers of the ocean to the west of the island will serve as a key sanctuary, providing nursing and feeding grounds. Sperm whales are essential to the marine environment as their feces provide nutrients for plankton, which capture carbon dioxide. Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerritt, commented that not only the majestic and highly intelligent animals will be safe, but the reserve will help keep the climate healthy. Kim Si-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. After a chilly start, afternoon highs will finally return to normal this afternoon in most parts of the country. Tomorrow is a Suneung Day with the college entrance exam taking place nationwide. It will not be very cold on the way to the exam site, but by the time test takers are heading home, they'll need an umbrella and a thicker jacket. Rain is in the forecast in the west in the morning, spreading nationwide by the afternoon. afternoon and expect to see 5 to 30 millimeters of showers with thunder and lightning. Now back to today's forecast. The sunny skies are in store nationwide with highs going a couple of notches higher than Tuesday. Seoul and Chuncheon will see highs at 12 degrees Celsius, Busan topping out at 16 degrees. Then please brace yourselves for a midwinter chill on Friday. Tomorrow's rain will bring a real chill to the country with a mix of rain and snow expected for most places on Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour. Coming up next is our panel session. Do stay with us.
Is learning Korean hard?
We'll teach you Korean the easy way.
Really? There's an easy way?
All you need to remember is 4 words. K-chat, conversing in Korean.
떡볶이 매워요.
검은색 립스틱이요.
한국의 겨울엔 추워요.
위, 아래.
오, 잘 가요. 고마워요.
빨간색보다 노란색이 잘 어울려요.
Don't miss out.
The president also remains committed to boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of this latest.
To discuss the current security environment.
The United Nations most powerful body on global security, expressing hope stock markets around the world have taken a hit. Speculation that the US Federal Reserve
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Welcome.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's my way? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
Come Thursday, silence will fall upon Korea as scholars sit down for Suneung, the country's annual college scholastic ability test. So what is the significance of Suneung? Why does Korea link Suneung to ultimate success in society? And how are pundits explaining the surge in Suneung retakers this year? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. We are counting down one day to Korea's college scholastic ability test, and today we touch upon this annual examination and its implications. For more on this, I have Professor Park Nam-gi at the Gwangju National University of Education live on the line. Professor Park, it's a pleasure.
It's nice to see you.
I also have Kwon Swa with us. Swa, welcome.
Hello, Sunny.
Right, so then let's start off with some very general information about Suneung this year.
Sure. So Thursday is D-Day for 504,588 people in Korea. That's the number of Suneung applicants this year for the 2024 college admission. So they will be taking their big test at 1,279 test sites in 84 regional exam units nationwide. And you don't take your Suneung at your own school's classroom, but at a different school that is designated beforehand, and it's usually either high schools or middle schools. So the Korea's college scholastic ability test begins at 8:40 in the morning and ends at 5:45 for some a little earlier. Now, the test subjects are, I'm going to mention them in the order they are taken: Korean language, mathematics, English, Korean history. Subordinate subjects, examinees choose among social studies, science, and vocational education. And last but not least, a second foreign language. And there's also a variety to choose from. Now, you can enter the test venue between 6:30 and you should be there at 8:10 a.m. So between 6:30 and 8:10 a.m. And this will be the first Suneung since 2020 that will be free of COVID-19 prevention rules. So even test takers confirmed with the virus or who have symptoms won't be separated from others. The Education Ministry, however, recommends the wearing of face masks. Infected exam takers will, however, eat lunch in a separate area for the safety of others. Now, speaking of safety, some 16,000 police personnel are to be mobilized for this year's Suneung. According to the National Police Agency, there will be officers in charge of overseeing sites that keep the questionnaires and answer sheets. There will also be officers helping in the distribution of exam papers and answer sheets, and also some thousands will be deployed at the test venues. Now, although you'll think that you won't be the one or your child won't be the one that's late for this extremely important test, it happens every year that an alarm doesn't go off, or I don't know what could happen. So For that, there are also police officers who deal with the traffic on Suneung Day, and there sure will be some taking latecomers safe and fast to their test sites as well. As is the norm on Suneung, planes do not take off or land during the English listening section, and many non-test taking kids and workers head out later than usual for school or work. And one last thing, no extraordinary cold wave is expected for Suneung Day because there's this word in Korean, Suneung hanpa, which means Suneung cold wave, but there's only expected to be some rain in the afternoon.
All right, good to know then. Professor Park, for the sake of our viewers who may not be familiar with Korea's college application procedure, could you tell us a bit about the importance of Suneung?
Okay. There are two types of university entrance exams. Early admission, we call it sushi, not Japanese sushi. Okay. And the regular admission, we call it jeong시. And the Suneung influences the regular admission. And there are two types of early admission process. One is based on student records, and the other is the essay test process. And the student records process primarily evaluates high school grades, including comprehensive student records or academic achievements only. However, some universities might also stipulate a minimum average grade in the Suneung for eligibility. And I want to share something about Korea. That is that many people worry about, curious about what makes Korean students study so hard. So one significant aspect is the belief in the fairness of the university admission system. For example, the direct influence of a parent's background on university entrance exams is strictly prohibited. For instance, admission through donations are not allowed. Moreover, the anonymous consideration of students' high school and socio-economic backgrounds is an essential aspect of the process. Violating these rules can result in severe legal consequences, including imprisonment. So in the university admission system, where students are selected purely on the basis of their academic achievement, most students are motivated to study hard to the last moment. That's why even students from affluent families also put in their best efforts to improve their academic performance to have admission from good universities.
Right. And that being said, Professor Park, would you agree if I say that most Koreans appear to believe that a degree from a prestigious university is prerequisite for success in society? And if that is the case, how do you explain this widespread belief?
The belief goes down a little bit, but still, it's a fact. Research shows that graduates from prestigious universities tend to have higher average salaries. In terms of getting a job, the direct influence of parents' socioeconomic background and the impact of recommendations are relatively low compared to other countries. To get a job at major corporations, including Samsung, or at reputable public institutions, one must pass employment exams, including written tests. The chances of passing these exams increase significantly if one has received a good education from a prestigious university. There have been some news reports of high-ranking officials and politicians losing their positions after being caught directly or indirectly influencing the employment of their children. We have that kind of fairness system. However, these days there is a growing number of companies that hesitate to hire these graduates due to issues in areas like personal character, teamwork, and consideration for others.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Sunun this year, I understand, comes after quite a bit of dispute over its format. Could you give us some background information?
Right, there is no change in the system or the general structure of the college entrance exam, but there's something that won't be included in this year's exam, which is killer questions. And those are a minority of extremely difficult questions in the exam, which often are decisive in differentiating between the best and very best test scores. The elimination of these questions came on the back of President Yoon Suk-yeol's call on excluding material that's not covered by public education. South Korea is notoriously known for its competitive education fever that leads to extensive dependence on private tutoring and academies or cram schools, well known as hagwon. And it's those hagwons that teach students how to solve questions that are at university level or which are those killer questions. The high costs for private education is seen as one of the reasons the country's fertility rate is shrinking at fast speeds. So the Education Ministry announced to get rid of the killer questions starting this Suneung. This announcement came back in June, and the move resulted in mixed responses. Some welcomed it as it paves the way for more equal opportunities, while others criticized and the sudden change with just 5 months left until the test would make things more complicated. There was also the argument that hagwons would come up with new strategies anyways to lure parents and students. Well, the decision has been made, and education officials went through numerous reviewing processes to make sure the change does not lead to confusion. As part of that, a new Sunun committee was in charge of examining the Sunun questions. They consist of 25 high school teachers with at least 10 years of teaching experience, however, no experience in making Sunun questions. And the Education Ministry also said that it has put special attention on the minimizing of errors in the test, because it's actually not uncommon that test takers make objections after Sunun to questions following the exam.
Right, I see. Professor Park, speaking within your capacity as a scholar yourself, what are your thoughts regarding concerns about the absence of killer questions?
Actually, it is not that clear whether the government's definition of killer questions refers to questions beyond the textbook scope or to questions that are difficult to solve in a given short time. Anyway, I support the idea of removing killer questions. Solving difficult questions in a short time requires extensive practice in problem solving, which may lead to an increase in problem solving skills rather than knowledge and capability enhancement. If we decide to move killer questions, it is crucial to have a strategy in place to maintain the ability to differentiate among students. One way to increase differentiation is to broaden the curriculum content and the scope of the exam, and accordingly increase the number of test questions. Then 100% will go down. And incorporating descriptive questions that assess advanced competencies is another effective method. About the policy that Suneung should only test material taught at school, considering the objectives of the Suneung, this policy does not seem appropriate, I think. The Suneung ought to assess advanced capability by evaluating students' ability to solve problems using the knowledge that have acquired in school, not just memorize things, right?
Right, of course. Professor Park, we had mock examinations prior to Thursday's Suneung, of course, and what were the mock examinations like?
Yes, we had recently October and September mock examination. So the mock examination for Suneung are set in a format and difficulty level similar to the actual Suneung exam. Students use these mock exams to identify their strengths and weaknesses and to plan their studies for the remaining period until the Suneung. And the government also used this research how to make the different, like the level of the Suneung based on the student academic the research. So there are noticeable difference in the perceived difficulty of September and October mock examinations after removal of killer questions. In the September one, 52% students felt it was very difficult, and 35% found it somewhat difficult. In contrast, in the October mock test, only 12% felt it was very difficult, and 23% found it somewhat difficult. So I think based on the October mock exams, there is a possibility that the proportion of high-scoring students in this year's Suneung will increase compared to last year.
Right, I see. And moving forward then, so over 30% of Suneung takers this year are test retakers. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular reality and its broader implications for parents especially?
Right. At the very beginning, I gave you the number of the registered people of applicants. Do you remember, Sunny?
300 and what's it?
It's a big number. It's 504,588.
Well, over 300 and something then.
That is almost 3,500 fewer applicants than last year. But here's the big but. Among the total number of applicants, 326,646, that's 64.7%, are high school graduates, and almost 160,000 or 31.7% of this year's Suneung takers are retakers. 재수생 in Korean, or you also say 삼수생, 사수생 if they take the test even a number of years. So we often refer to them as Nsuseng. And this proportion of retakers is the highest in 28 years. Last year, the percentage of retakers was 28%, and also back then it was the highest in 22 years. So what does that mean? Of course, a big concern for those who take Suneung for the first time, more competition with experienced test takers. The reason behind the increase in those who are taking another shot in Suneung may be due to expectations of an easier test this year, but also the government's plan to expand the enrollment quota at medical schools. In fact, heads of Hagwon said many students focusing on science and math-related subjects are actually turning towards preparations for a medical school.
Right, I see. And staying with that, Professor Park, how do you explain this phenomenon of having more test retakers this particular year?
Yes, like you said, there's in 27 years, the retakers ratio is the highest. It's something, right? I think there are two reasons. It's already told that the number of high school graduates taking the Suneung has significantly decreased, but the quotas for prestigious universities and popular departments have not. So as a result, college students and even those already employed are retaking the Sunun, and they want to change their lifestyle and job. And another factor is the disappearance of killer questions, like you said already, which has increased the chances of students who are not exceptionally outstanding to score well through retaking the exam. They think they may have better score. This possibility has led to a significant increase in the number of students opting to retake. And it is expected that the number of retakers will further increase if the quotas for medical school are expanded in the future. It's not decided yet.
Right, I see. And Professor Park, based on what you've shared with us earlier on, it's obvious that Suneung is a very important part of the entrance procedure for universities. That being said, is there a way to make Suneung a more effective testing tool, do you think?
Yes, the Suneung should measure advanced capabilities such as application, analysis, implementation, criticism, and creativity, not just memorizing power. To achieve this, it is necessary to introduce essay-based exams alongside multiple choice tests. And furthermore, the duration of the Suneung exam should be extended from 1 day to 2 days or more, like some European countries, I think.
What about the importance of interviews, do you think, for entrance to university? Would that play a very important role here in Korea?
Yes. It's based on, it's different from university to university. Some university case, they make the big difference at the interview score. Then interview will be the most important thing. But some universities, they don't make the score gap not big. Then that is not that important. But usually in the 정시, they don't take the interview as seriously. But sushi, usually they put some score there, and make it an important criteria.
Right, sushi being the early admission procedure that you mentioned earlier then. Right, so let's end on a light note. As test takers tackle Suneung within classrooms, I believe their family members are elsewhere seeking to raise their chances of success.
Right, not only the students prepare for Suneung, but their parents, especially moms, I have to say, because they are more likely to get really involved in actual preparations for the big test. And those preparations include studying themselves, maybe not the Suneung material, but admission procedures and information of different universities. So with which scores can my child go to which place, or where should he or she apply for sushi, which is what Professor Park explained earlier. So parents go to many school information sessions that provide information on requirements for different universities. And where you can also find them is at Buddhist temples or Christian churches, where moms in particular pray all day during the 8 to 9 hours. Others pray in front of the exam venue schools to root for their kids as near as possible. In the days, weeks, and months ahead of D-Day, parents also make sure to make no sounds at home and to do their utmost in keeping the test takers' so-called condition at the best.
Right, and speaking about that, we had these posts on our apartment complex talking about the need to be a bit quiet during the period leading up to Suneung, which would be 2 weeks before Suneung.
Oh, I see.
All right, so as always, thank you very much for that. And Professor Park, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks.
Right, well, with our best wishes to Suneung takers this year, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.